PM Express tonight, a conversation we've been having since the declaration of the election results. Tonight, we're looking at how to maintain peace in the face of a contentious elections. And the NDC, the opposition NDC, is yet to come to terms with the results of the just ended elections. There's been concerns from all angles as to how the country can come out of this in one piece. And a lot of suggestions coming up. The NDC is accusing the Electoral Commission of presiding over a fraudulent outcome in the 2020 presidential and parliamentary elections. And it says it will do everything. Its presidential candidate, John Mahama, has threatened to take all legitimate steps to reverse what he describes as a travesty of justice. And you ask yourself, what are the steps that the NDC intends to take? And the NDC presidential candidate adds, what the NDC witnessed across the country during the elections exposed a deliberate plan to manipulate and predetermine the results of the elections in favor of the incumbent. Those are the claims of the NDC. But what avenues are available to dealing with these claims being made by the NDC and its leader, former President Mahama? Now, before we went into the 2020 polls, the Supreme Court put together an adjudication plan to deliver judgment on an election petition in 42 days. And of course, this is something that the Supreme Court envisaged. We are not new to this. We experienced this in 2012. So, of course, they planned ahead of the elections. The manual provides that only the declared winner of the presidential poll and the Electoral Commission can be respondents to a presidential election petition. Remember, in 2012, the NDC was made to join as a respondent. But in this case, nobody is allowed to join unless the presidential candidate. Now, a major departure from the 2013 presidential election petition, and which was filed by Akufo-Addo, by the way, and it traveled more than 8 months, and which had the NDC being allowed to join as a respondent. This time, no, they can't be part. Now, the two major changes form part of the new Supreme Court Amendment Rules 2016 CI-99, which was enacted into law by Parliament in 2017. Per the Rule 69C4 of CI-99, the pre-trial of the petition shall be on the 10th day after the filing of the petition, with hearing commencing on the 15th day and ending on the 21st day, respectively, after the filing, while judgment will be delivered on the 42nd day. At least that's what the Supreme Court is envisaging. There's been a number of violence. 5 people are so far dead out of the over 60 incidents of violence during and after the elections. According to the police, 5 people are dead already. 21 out of the incidents are true cases of the electoral violence, while 6 involved gunshots. Now, some members of Parliament-elect, including that of Kita and Nalerigu, and their families have been attacked already. They've had their fair share of the violence. And the youth in Keita, as a result, are accusing police for not promptly responding to distress calls, demanding transfer of all police officers on duty that night, adding they have lost confidence in the police. This is a very serious issue that we need to deal with going forward, looking at how our election has panned out. Now, supporters of the NDC have been demonstrating across the country, and it's also a worrying trend that people are suggesting that we find a way to nib it in the bud. So tonight, we're asking what other remedies are available to resolving a contentious elections as we try to maintain peace in the face of the disagreements. Tonight, I'll be joined by Martin Kwebu, who is a constitutional lawyer. Colonel Festus Boahena Boaje is a security analyst. Most Reverend Professor Emmanuel Asante is the immediate past chairman of the National Peace Council. And Dr. Kojo Pumpuni Asante is Director of Advocacy and Policy Engagement at the Center for Democratic Development, Ghana. When I return, the conversation will kickstart. Welcome back to PM Express. My name is Aisha Ibrahim. I'm grateful that you joined us and my guest on this show tonight. Let me start with you, Most Reverend Professor Asante, because 3 days into the elections, both candidates, former President Mahama and President Akufo-Addo, signed a peace pact supervised by the National Peace Council. What's your appreciation of how events have turned as former President Mahama is yet to come to terms with the outcome of the presidential and parliamentary elections?
Well, let me say that as far as I'm concerned, the constitution of this country allows aggrieved parties to seek redress. In fact, the very day that they signed the pact, the Chief Justice gave them what you just referred to, the fourth edition of the manual for adjudication. And the purpose was to help them appreciate the need to seek redress in court, not on the streets of this country. That the President Mahama and the NDC, and for that matter, President Mahama is saying that they will not accept. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, they have every right to express their views. But they do not have the right to compromise the peace of this country in expressing their views. As far as I'm concerned, I believe that if they feel strongly that they have been given a raw deal, they should rather take the legal path to seek redress. It has happened in this country before. 2012, we saw it. And the present-day candidate, Akufo-Addo, at the time, and his party, the NPP, sought redress in the courts. So I would think that, you know, when they signed the peace accord, there was a commitment that if they were not happy with the results, the declared results, they will seek redress through legal means. And I'm waiting to see that will be the steps that they will take, rather than taking to the streets, burning ties, inciting people to march to different places to demand what they consider to be the right.
I'm happy that you talked about the adjudication manual, and you also talked about the 2012 election petition. Now, you recall the election petition traveled more than 8 months, perhaps reason why the Supreme Court adjudication manual for this year reduced time for settling such disputes to just for 2 hours. In fact, Chief Justice himself, Justice Enini Yeboah, said the new amendment was to guide the apex court to expeditiously deal with electoral disputes. So this was actually envisaged as a possibility. And that's why many say this type of fallout from a major election shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. Dr. Kojo Pumpuni Asante, what's your own valuation of the unfolding event?
Well, thank you very much, and good evening to your viewers. I think, I mean, it's unfortunate, the kind of some of the incitement and some of the statements that have been made by, you know, political parties around the issue of the results. I just think that, you know, I mean, these are not neophytes. If you take the current candidates, these are personalities that have been involved in elections for many, many years. They are very well schooled in the procedure for dealing with election disputes. You know, they have been on the ground, they have been at very strategic positions, so they know what to do. So some of the antics I find is regrettable. And I don't understand why that particular path has been chosen, because at the end of the day, to be able to determine whether or not one person has won or one person has lost, or to dispute what the Electoral Commission has declared as, you know, a winner or a loser, you still have to go through the same procedure. You have to bring evidence of fraud, inconsistencies, collation problems, whatever it is, to a forum, the right appropriate forum, in order for the correction to be made. Without that, you can't, no matter what you do, you will still come to the same end. So why are we in this situation where it's, people are protesting, but they are not prepared to move to the right forums for these discussions to be had? And that really surprises me, because I'm still trying to understand what is the end game. Because for what I see, if you want the proper thing done, you will still have to go through that process. And I don't even see too much of a contention. The parliamentary issues that have been raised, a lot of the issues have already been decided. I think it's 1 seat or 2 seats or 3 seats that are in contention. And the parties on both sides have indicated they're going to go to court. So where is this violence and protest coming from? It baffles me. So that's the regrettable part of it, because I know that the people who are involved are very experienced and they should know better.
Maybe Colonel Festus Abuaji retired may have some answers for us. Before we went into these elections, you had warned, and some events you said were sending signals of violence, or these pockets of violence in the upcoming elections. Did you envisage that the violence will come with this gravity, the way we've seen in this just ended elections?
Thank you, Aisha. Let me recognize Dr. Kojo Asante and the Most Reverend, of course, my very good friend, Senior Counsel Pebo. Now, allow me to make a few generalized, statements. First of all, I wish that all your audiences would appreciate that what is at stake is not between NDC and MPP. What is at stake is Ghana's democracy, based on the principle that, which is the democratic principle, that the only way that you can change governments and choose those who represent the people is through democratic elections. So, if somebody perceives that the way and manner in which the application of these principles, were not above board, then of course there is a likelihood that there could be violence. Secondly, the Peace Pact was based on certain inherent assumptions. It was not that those who signed the pact said that irrespective of the outcome and whether they were free, fair, transparent, had integrity, that the results would be accepted. The inherent assumption was that the results must be based on a process that was free, fair, and transparent. So again, if one or the other party, in this case both parties, have cause to think that that process was a bit flawed here and there, then of course there is now grounds for the kind of agitation that we are seeing. Now, this emphasis on let's go to court, go to court, go to court. It happened in 2012. Without interrogating whether the framework that we have, is sound. That from elections, the only alternative to resolving any dispute that arises from the election results is to go to court. Without any intermediary, conciliatory, mechanisms, maybe administrative in nature. It's something that I think we need to look at. And lastly, we need to find the causal explanations of why this is happening. My idea, expressed in this book, was that looking at the voter registration in July, August, and in the aftermath during the voter exhibition, And then looking further back to Ayawaso, West Wogon. And then from 2008, when political vigilantism, emerged in our political interactions and discourses, that it was very likely that 7th December was going to see cases of violence. This is where, again, I depart from the view of the majority, that you don't measure the results of the elections only in terms of the numbers of violent incidents. And therefore, if you take 38,000 polling stations and only 10 were violent, then the results are okay. You look at the nature of those incidents, the impact, as we now know, on the psyche of the Ghanaian people. And you know that, no, all is not well. And let me make the last point that during the 28 years of this Fourth Republic, there has not been a presidential parliamentary election that has witnessed the loss of lives. So if all of a sudden, on the basis of political vigilantism surrounding by-elections and reruns, political vigilantism, other forms of violence during voter registration, and now during the presidential and parliamentary elections, there is cause for us to be concerned that our electoral processes are becoming more violent. And this is the premise upon which we need to interrogate why there is that agitation about the losers and or the winners or both, So the signs were there, except that we're probably not paying attention.
Were we taken off guard?
No, we were not taken off guard. We're not taken off guard at all. Because the fact is that, and many people have said it, that political vigilantism did not end with Act 999. Most reverend can speak to that. Even if we proscribed it, we did not take the necessary steps to dismantle the 27 groups that were listed in the schedule of the Act. We did not call their leadership to account. They did not tell Ghanaians who their members are, who finances them, what weapons and ammunition they had. So it was not surprising that during the voter registration, political vigilantism or acts thereof occurred. Now, Ododio during the elections, Savelugu, Keta, where else? Senya.
They were all
acts of political vigilantism.
And they were seen as flashpoints.
Well, they said the police said that the people ran away. I have information that somebody looked the other way to allow them to escape. That is Ewutu Senya East. Before we even come to the Ewutu Senya West, the Bojuasi incident. We need to admit that our democracy is not healthy. The more we think that, Ghana is a beacon of democracy, Ghana is a beacon of democracy, and yet we go to elections, and in 28 years of consolidating democracy, we've lost 7 lives or 6 lives. The police itself, election security management, also have part of the blame to take. The methods that they used, the way and manner in which they tried to control that scene at Techiman South is contrary to all principles of democratic policing. And I want any professional police officer to tell me that the way to control the crowd was to fire sporadically, fire into the ground, and if somebody was trying to snatch a loudhailer, megaphone, that we should end up with 2 dead and 1 dying subsequently in a hospital.
That's unfortunate.
You see, so the IGP, as he has said, must investigate. But after the investigation, good or bad, the report must be taken to court. Well, that's the principle of democratic policing, that you must go to court and justify why it was necessary for you to use force.
You made a very interesting point there, which I want Lawyer Martin Kpebu to elaborate on, the question of whether our framework is sound, and because a lot of people are talking about going to court. Because if you look at Chapter 4 of the amended adjudication manual, it actually deals with election disputes. And the NDC, in arguing that the elections are flawed, have made some fundamental points. And they're basing their argument on CI 99 and also Article 49. Article 49, Clause 2, and I'll just read portions of it. It said, immediately after the close of polls, the presiding officer shall, in the presence of such candidates or their representatives or polling agents present, proceed to count at the polling station the ballot papers of the station, record the votes cast in favor of each candidate or question. The presiding officer, the candidates, or their representatives and polling agents, if any, shall sign a declaration stating the polling station, the number of votes cast in favor of each candidate or question. The NDC says in some polling stations they refused to sign because they were not in agreement with what the presiding officers had done with the counting. But yet the EC went ahead to declare results. What's your appreciation of the law vis-a-vis the EC's conduct in what has just happened in the just ended elections?
Okay, so if we're using strict law alone, on the face of the law, what CI 127 provides is that, one, if you have any grievance against what the EC has done, you may write your protest. You say it, where the sign. You're allowed to protest. That's one. And then two, they say that the protest is not sufficient to prevent the EC from going ahead with the work. So in this case, the declaration. Okay. The protest is not sufficient. So the EC will go ahead and declare, notwithstanding your protest. But note your protest down, okay? Put it in writing. There's part of the form. They say that where you indicate there's opportunity for the party agent to protest, okay? Yes, so that's going strictly by law. But we also know that, you see, it's not every time that you just say, oh, what does the law say? You throw it in the person's face. No. To a large extent, some of the critical things we do in our elections are based on consensus building. You see the IPAC. IPAC is not a constitutional provision. I mean, that body is not set up by the Constitution. Yet, you see that it has evolved over these decades to become a very strong pillar in our elections, okay? So, to that extent, it's a mixture of both the hard law and also soft law, where we do a lot of consultation and consensus building, okay? Yes, so that's the two approaches to look at it. So, okay.
But let's look at the bigger picture in which the NDC has been outlining in its process of outcome, that the EC announced that Nana Addo of the NPP won the election with over 6 million votes, representing 51.59% of the total vote cast. John Mahama polled 6,214,889, representing 47.36%. Now, a statement comes after this. The EC, after declaration, says the chairperson unintentionally used 13,433,573 as a total valid votes cast to declare results, instead of the 13,119,460, and adds that the correction in figures does not change the percentage stated for each candidate and the declaration made by the chairperson. What do you make of the EC's conduct? Could the EC have averted this particular error?
Well, that's a $1 million question. You know, I think, to be candid, in life, even sometimes 1 + 1, you'll be surprised somebody will end up saying 3. So to that extent, it's extremely difficult to say that no matter what they did, or they could have just avoided it. Sometimes mistakes just happen. That one, you can't hold it. Except that there are some things they did which now have given people cause to worry that this mistake was needless. You say, but it shouldn't follow. The antecedent is that the EC had said they would declare within 24 hours. So you see that people have connected that fact.
And even that one, a lot of people have problems with that. Why the rush?
So that's what I'm saying. So people have connected the fact that the EC had promised to declare within 24 hours to the declaration, the mistake. People have connected the two, saying that it's because of the haste, because of the rush. That's why they made a mistake. But in all honesty, it doesn't follow. It's not logical. Yes, the person could have promised that I will deliver within 24 hours, didn't deliver. And it doesn't mean that because of it, that's why the mistake necessarily happened. No, sometimes mistakes just happen.
Okay.
So I wouldn't say that it necessarily follows.
Looking at the tension that, existed before we went into the elections, people think that these petty errors by the EC has actually deepened the suspicion by the opposition NDC.
Yes, that you can't take it away from them. Yes, so that's why I say in the society, for me, you see, what happens is that in matters like this, I would just usually look at the substance because mistakes happen. We all sit here, look, doctors make mistakes, patients die. In every profession, look, the best. I sometimes say that we come and sit here, they say, oh, this lawyer is excellent, is good. You come to the courts, go and ask the judges, they will tell you the mistakes we make. Even the judges themselves, they also make mistakes. So everywhere, these things happen. So usually, I'm not the type that holds it against somebody if a small mistake happens. There's pressure. There's enormous pressure. Let's go beyond that mistake and see. Me, where I just couldn't quite follow was that they said, even though the denominator had changed, the figures, that's where, and I've not seen the statisticians and mathematicians coming forward to say something had really changed. So Aisha, that's where I want to be educated. You see, the EC made a mistake and said, but the overall average, the percentages don't change. So far, have you seen somebody come out to show that it has indeed changed? That is where I stand to be corrected.
The NDC have been putting together their numbers and they are making that allegation.
You see, yes, so I haven't particularly seen that. And also, because they have a very huge stake in the game, usually it would be good, it would be very beneficial to have impartial persons also come in to corroborate. Yes, you do that. You take the NDC's figures, take also what third party, let's say impartial persons. As for being neutral, it's difficult, but at least there are people who, though may have vested interest, they can be very impartial. So let's do that. So let's stick to the substance. If we get the evidence of the mistake having impacted the results, and that's what the adjudication manual is all about. It's about mistakes that impact the overall results, not minor ones.
Okay.
You see it? Yes.
Can I make a quick point on?
Go ahead, Reverend.
Now, when I listened,
Kennel.
sorry, I'm not a reverend.
Kennel.
When I listened to the EC, my understanding was that the EC said, look, I made a declaration in which I mistakenly, that is in the speech, substituted the total votes cast for the total valid votes. But assured Ghanaians that the analysis done by the EC was based on the total valid votes cast.
Okay.
And on that premise, on those grounds, say that the percentages that you mentioned, didn't change.
Yep.
Now, senior counsel is asking for expert data analysis. Now, this is one. Research and Grant Institute of Ghana. They have stated here that the EC adjusted numbers.
Okay.
Where Ekweadonko was deducted 1, NDC was deducted 1,707, Christian Kwabna Andrews lost 17, but MPP gained 174. The point is, if indeed the analysis of the valid votes cast was only swapped during the speech, but the actual analysis was based on total valid votes, why is there need now to adjust the figures? So that analysis is there. I've seen 2 of them. This one is the most comprehensive, where they have adduced evidence.
And this is by?
The Research and Grant Institute of Ghana.
Okay.
And have proceeded to request or invite the EC to explain a number of issues that they have listed in this document. Okay. About how many? 6. Now, as of now, EC has not come to explain. Now, for instance, what is the basis of Ekweadonko's -1? Where did it come from? You see what I mean? The EC was not transparent, and the EU has spoken to that, or EC. EU, I think.
EU, yes.
How did the EC arrive at the summary at the national level? The political party said, we want to know. In any case, when the ballots are declared counted and declared at the ballot station. The figures are now in the public domain. So you have computed them. The parties say, give us the constituency summaries, give us the regional summaries, and give us the spreadsheet for the national. What our learned friend said was that the law is the law. Societies are not governed by law alone. They're also governed by traditions and practice. There is informed knowledge that Afarijan would have gathered all the political party representatives in the strong room, giving them the spreadsheet and asked them to study the spreadsheet and point out to him whether there were any discrepancies. Did the EC do that? You see it? So where we are is a culmination of a number of things that went wrong on the part of the EC, on the part of the Election Security Task Force, on the part of political vigilantes, sheer criminals who went around snatching ballot papers and so on. The population is the one that must take the credit for how peaceful the elections were. Not the election security, not the EC. Those of us who went, and my ink is still there, and just cast my vote at 2:30 and went home. We are the ones who must be congratulated. Not the institutions that clothe themselves in opacity and have brought us to where we are.
Indeed, there's also the bit about whether if the polling agents were a bit vigilant or competent enough, we could have averted this. But of course, that's where a school of thought will say that, I mean, they were vigilant, but in the event where men in uniform were actually used to bully them, would it have made any difference? But let me bring in Most Reverend Professor Asante here. Most Reverend, there's some men of God have been speaking, and one of such is the General Overseer of the Perez Chapel, Charles Ajanasari, who wants John Mahama, who is the opposition leader, to do the right thing. The General Overseer of the Royal House Chapel has also been speaking, and for him, President Akufo-Addo should reach out to John Mahama. He says the reverse should have been the case, but in this situation, he wants the president to reach out to John Mahama to have a tete-a-tete. He also wants some NDC MPs giving appointment in the government. How does all of this come across to you?
I'm not going to comment on their position because that is the way they look at it. But all that I want to say is that we need to be very careful in our discussion here, that we don't start apportioning blames here and there and exacerbate an already tensive situation that we find ourselves in. The question is, there is a tensive situation, and we are not here to do a blame game. How do we solve that problem? All these things that we are talking about here is not going to solve the problem that is confronting us, whether it's the EC that did this or whether it is the police that did this or that. These are things that can be discussed. Right now, we are confronted with a certain situation. How do we go about it? There are two things that I think the NDC, from my perspective, and all the other parties can do is, for people to come together and to say that, look, let us find a better way of trying to address this situation. A middle arbitration, if you like. But that is not going to change the declaration. Declaration has been made. But we are going to say that I'm not happy with it. So because I'm not happy with it, these are my data, these are my facts. I would want to seek redress in a competent court of jurisdiction. If we do not have, the courts and all these things, all these other, the courts are there because of our human weaknesses, because we are not perfect, because we can make mistakes. And in some cases, these mistakes that we make will call for, the court sitting down and trying to help us solve that kind of problem. That's how society gets on. We all make mistakes all the time. But if we start, the moment we start apportioning blame here and there, we're going to create all sorts of tensions and problems for ourselves. I think there is a problem. NDC is not happy with the way things have gone. They have every right to gather their information and seek redress, there are two things they can do. They can say, we don't want to go to court, but we want, we are seeking, we want to sit with our brothers from the other side and try to solve this problem in the interest of Mother Ghana, as the two ministers are saying. Or they can also say, we will use the facilities that we have, which are important aspects of our democracy, the courts, to try to solve these problems that we have. We cannot avoid that. That's the only way we will be able to solve the problems that we have, rather than taking to the streets and then justifying why we have to take to the streets and all that. The legal paths are the ways that we need to take to address this situation, as far as I'm concerned.
And also with the men of God calling for each other to, come in, you don't have a point on that?
I don't think that I have any problems with that. If the NDC would want to take that step, it is up to them to take that step. If, on the other hand, the government would want to give the olive branch, it is for them to do that. But let us be realistic enough. Look at the situation now that we find ourselves in. The Peace Council went there, and you saw the anger. What happened to the Peace Council? I'm no longer with the Peace Council, but at least I have spoken to my friends, my colleagues, and you saw what happened. So as far as I'm concerned, if they have, they feel strongly about what is happening, and that there are facts to prove that, I think they need to take the legal paths to seek redress. It has happened in this country before. The Afarijan situation that Colonel was referring to, I was in that room 2012 when the MPP was challenging this issue. At some point, we would have wished that the Electoral Commission would wait and look at the facts and those things that have been brought. Afarijan says, as far as he was concerned, that is the Commission, what they have, as soon as they get the critical masses that will enable them to declare the elections, they will do so. And once they do so, those who are not happy with it can take to the courts. And in fact, he was prepared to help them give whatever documents that they may need to let them go to court, so that they can seek redress.
I'll be getting into that, whether or not the NDC would have a case in court. But let me also bring in Dr. Kojo Asante here. Doc, what's your take on suggestions that some NDC MP should be giving appointments in government?
Well, I think I need to share some perspective. There's a lot that has been said that I think it's important that those of us who understand the process and have some knowledge. This is my fourth election. 16 years I've been at CDD. I was a national manager for the Codeo National Information Center. And for the 4,000 observers that we deployed, in terms of the voting process, it was smooth. In many cases, in terms of the results, both parties, they had their polling agents there, and they signed the declaration of results. And even the NDC has stated in many forums that they don't necessarily have a problem with the voting day or the voting period. It's the collation that they've raised an issue with. So I think it's important, because sometimes I have seen a lot of analysis that really, for me, is just misinformation. And knowingly, people putting misinformation out and using that to incite, or people who, maybe if it's not even an incitement, but people on the ground that probably don't have the kind of knowledge that we have about the electoral process, taking in, this information and going out there and, it's feeding into their anger and their disappointment and their frustration. So I think there's a lot that people in responsible position have to recognize that if they keep doing that, this process will come to an end at some point, but they would have inadvertently undermined the same institutions that we want to preserve and secure for future elections. So I think it's very, very important, particularly around the EC's computation issues. We know that they use the total valid votes, which means they included the rejected ballots, yes. And when you do the computations after, there are some votes that are off and so on and so forth. I have said that before there is a declaration of president instrument that is done, they have to make sure that the source documents, that is the regional summary of results, are consistent with the national collation sheet that was used. And all of the source documents have been signed by the parties. So even you forget about collation center and so on and so forth. The regional summaries, and this has been posted on the website of the EC. So we are not far off from agreeing on, what exactly the results are and who have won and who has lost. Yes, when you do the computations, as it was done when they said, they have used the wrong denominator, there were still some few votes off. Those things have to be corrected because they are legal documents. So even if people signed it, they have to bring those officers back, the political party polling agents, back to sign off, because otherwise, even when you go to court, that would not be a correct representation of what the EC has declared. So I accept that. But you cannot then jump from that and then start talking about systematic rigging and all of those things. So, I think that it's very important that, those that have a position of knowledge do not feed into some of the misinformation that is being put out. The EC is an embarrassment, and a lot of it, they have brought it upon themselves. And I agree with panelists that actually they should be holding a press conference and engaging, stakeholders and saying, yes, these are the issues that we encountered. We can explain the mistake, because that's the important. Why is this mistake and so on and so forth, so that they can take the questions and respond to it, because it helps with the healing and it helps in letting people understand, the public understand why these issue or errors have occurred. That's a very important first step. But I want to draw the line where people are just being mischievous and will still use total votes cast to do computations and say, no, but this person should have gotten 49 and all of those things. I think that is completely unacceptable and should not be entertained.
It's quite interesting you made that point, and indeed it's just the honorable thing to do, that the EC should be holding a press conference and addressing some of the issues that are coming. I'm sure that can calm nerves. I can see that Colonel Abuaje wants to make some interjections or give some responses, but let me take this break. When I return from the break, we'll be looking at whether the NDC would have a case. Everybody says if you have a case, go to court. We'll look at that and also look at what the way forward looks like for us into other elections yet to come, so we don't get this kind of violence and tension. Stay with me. Welcome back to PM Express. My guest tonight, Colonel Festus Abuaje, retired. Martin Kpebu is a constitutional lawyer. Dr. Kojo Pumpuni Asante is with the CDD, and Most Reverend Professor Emmanuel Asante, immediate past chairman of the National Peace Council. Before I went on that break, we're talking about everybody calling on the NDC to go to court and stop using the public court. Looking at all the facts being outlined by the NDC? And I mean, from where you sit, do you think the NDC has a case in court?
Well, Aisha, I wish I could answer that question properly, but as we sit here, I'm not sure any of us has seen the NDC's case in terms of the actual figures that can overturn the results. You see, so that's where the $1 million question is, the evidence. So it's when they outdoor it, as we sit now, to the extent that that evidence has not been put out in the public, nobody can answer that question honestly. No, you'll just be speculating. So I'm sure in due course, the NDC will put out that information, and then we can look at it and analyze. Yes.
Is there any other remedy apart from going to court?
Oh, in the constitutional democracy, naturally, the demonstrations, writing articles and other things in newspapers, and then having programs in the electronic media, TVs and the rest, social media and all those other ones is certainly the way to go. You see, there is a certain part of it that it's not just about winning, but I'm sure also they will have their sights on 2024. So sometimes having these programs will help to psych people up that, will, look, maybe they were cheated out of 2020. So in 2024, and you know, naturally it will be 8 years. So they have a huge advantage going to 2024 because of that 8-year cycle thing. So if they are doing it, sometimes you should look at it in that perspective that, well, it may not just be about winning in a court of law, but the court of public opinion is actually even more important because it's about beginning to psych up voters that in 2024, naturally, the 8-year cycle would have come, so they should be given their turn.
Kenneth, how do we move from where we are now?
Well, we've lost precious time. And in a sense, we have ceded the initiative, to the clouds or whatever it is. But let me make this point that pacifism may also not help us. If indeed the court is the final arbiter, we don't even need this panel. Let everybody go to court, and that's it. Why are we here? We are trying to understand the dynamics of the process that led us to where we are. So we all agree that protest must not be violent. It must be condemned. Hate speech in all its forms must be condemned roundly. Those who perpetrated crimes during the elections, whether professional security personnel or not, must be investigated and dealt with. That is the essence of trying to understand the process. I've mentioned political vigilantism. We need to revisit that discourse because it's not going away. Now, if we say that, let's use pacifism and let people go to court if they are aggrieved, then let's close all close all these platforms. The way forward, first of all, is to interrogate some of these dynamics that all of us have contributed to make sure that the rule of law is upheld. Is what I mean. That's one. The rule of law is not about going to court to seek redress for manipulation of the elections or rigging. It's also about all the things that we did wrong. Now let me throw in one point that Kwesi Pratt made that I found quite intriguing or very interesting. What is a declaration? I think our understanding has been hitherto that when the EC mounts the public platform and announces the figures, she has declared. It's sacrosanct. If you don't accept, go to court. Kwesi Pratt is arguing that if that be the case, the EC should have gone to court to ask the court to allow her to change the figures. This is an issue that going forward we need to address. Whether the declaration is certified in a gazette or whether it is a public announcement. This is the essence of such discussions. But it's very, very crucial. EC has said, or many people have said, the Constitution says declare the results in 72 hours. Why the rush? Because there is something in conflict that we call raising expectations. Now, if you raise the expectations and 24 hours lapse, you haven't declared the results.
And
people sit at home and they keep wondering what is going on. So part of the problem, as colleagues have said, was brought upon the EC by itself.
By itself. And I
You
think
know.
going forward, it's something that the EC need to check and also come out and speak with the public so that all of this will be put to rest. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming. And thank you very much, gentlemen, for also joining us via Zoom. I'm grateful for your time, you at home. My name is Aisha Ibrahim. Enjoy the rest of our programs.
Thank you.